Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Here in the studio. Before we talk about Israel and the question of Jerusalem, this threat of cutting foreign aid, is it just bluster or is Donald Trump serious?
I think it's his it's his approach to foreign policy and to diplomacy. He sees development assistance as he has this kind of very transactional way of doing both politics and policy. And so in international affairs, he has this idea that when you give money to a partner, you buy something in return. And the problem with, for instance, cutting foreign aid to Egypt is that you don't give military assistance to Egypt because you want to buy something from the Egyptians, but because this is in the US security interest, or that was the way the US saw it for so long, and that could be put in question by the way Trump approached these issues.
But isn't Donald Trump right that aid is not philanthropy? You're not giving away the money for free. You're expecting something in return, soft power.
But you're doing it for your own interest and not because you think you're going to buy out the others. I'm not saying that this is sheer philanthropy that the US has been giving, for instance, military cooperation money to Egypt. It's because of US security interest. So the US precisely are doing it not just out of sheer philanthropy. If you look at the amount of money that the US is giving in terms of international development aid, it's not that much. It's a lot because the US is such a big economy. But in share of what the others are spending, in share of its GDP, it's not that much, and it's actually going down recently under the Trump administration. And so that's a leverage that the US are depriving themselves of in terms of pursuing their own national interest in relations with key countries like all the ones that were mentioned, whether it's Western European allies or Middle Eastern partners or other kind of countries.
Manuel Rapnouil, we have the vote. It's just come in. 128 in favor of that resolution condemning the U.S. move, 9 against, 35 abstentions. What's your reaction to the numbers there?
That it's less bad for the U.S. than it could have been. I don't think that the US were to hope. It's a tradition, irrespective of whether it's Trump in the White House or not, that on the Middle East issue, there's a huge majority in favor of Palestine and Palestinian-led initiative like this one, which was very much put in motion with the support of the Palestinian Authority. Usually the key is how many countries abstain rather than vote in favor of the resolution, which is against the US. So it's not that bad. But obviously, this is exactly what Trump didn't want to see. And the way that he raised his profile and that his representative in New York raised her profile to try to prevent that vote from happening is going to make it more damaging, even if the result is not, it's probably average. I would have to compare with previous vote, but it's probably average to what it is usually. It's probably more damaging because of the importance that the US gave to the vote.
Yeah, more damaging how?
More damaging in terms of perception of US policy. The thing that the US usually manage to have is a kind of legitimacy of international leadership in trying to steer not just the UN, but for instance, the so-called Middle East peace process, irrespective of whether people thought that the US was neutral. Everybody knows that the US is not neutral on that issue, but everybody believes that the US has the clout that it takes and was behaving in a way that it was a good idea to give the US some way and some support to play that role in the Middle East peace process. One of the things that can happen right now is that the US is losing this. When the US goes against Iran and try to put in jeopardy the Iran nuclear deal, there's an addition with the climate deal also. There's an addition of behavior where the US basically say what America first means, this Trump slogan, what America first means is our interests, and it's our way or the highway, is not the best way to do multilateralism. So the US can say, well, we don't care because the UN General Assembly votes are usually not that relevant. And however, if the only conclusion to that is that we will save money for ourselves, they may feel that they are better off with saving this money, but it's not going to make their interest and their ability to pursue their national interest any better. And so it's both damaging them in terms of how they're perceived by some countries which should be natural partners and interlocutors, and the ones that have been mentioned with the previous speaker, but also in their own ability to have the tools that it takes to do foreign policy. If you're cutting aid, again, you're depriving yourself of a key tool to pursue your own interests, not just to be philanthropic.
This militarized diplomacy, what are going to be the long-term effects for the United States?
There is a kind of militarization of diplomacy because Trump is, again, not relying as much as he could and probably as he should on the civilian side of foreign policy, whether it's diplomacy.
There's all these ambassador posts that haven't been filled.
Or even in Department of State in Washington, D.C. And there's a kind of uncertainty about what the U.S. foreign policy direction is, given the number of divergences that you have from the various official statements.
But is the U.S. bigger than one man and one administration? And so, all right, right now he's in this transactional mode, as you put it, taking a wrecking ball to diplomacy as it was, but it'll all blow over.
When you travel to the U.S. and you meet with U.S. officials, a lot of them tell you more or less explicitly, you know what, he's the president, he's important, he's a force to reckon with, but basically there's no change, it's mostly continuity. There's a lot of talk, there's a lot of tweets, but look at what we're actually doing, and what we are actually doing is mostly continuity. What is happening, what has happened over the last months is putting that into question. I believe that, yes, Trump has the ability, because the president of the US is an immensely powerful person, he has the ability to actually introduce disruption. And that disruption and the instability, or just the uncertainty, the fact that you can't know for sure, or you can't even have an informed guess about what the US policy is going to be on that topic and how they're going to behave and how they're going to anticipate consequences. It's very informative to see how the US basically made this Jerusalem recognition announcement, basically saying, we are taking Jerusalem off the table. Now this is settled, and that is making a big service to the cause of peace. And now this is becoming a mess, not just on the ground, but diplomatically and for them. The fact that it's very uncertain how they will behave and what will be the consequences of it, including, and to begin with, because they don't anticipate those consequences, is a lot of a problem. And therefore, obviously, the US is more than just a person in the White House, but the way now they work, the way that functions, is troubling, to say the least.
One final question for you. If the US is erratic, is no longer the guardian of the liberal order, if you will, where does that leave France, who's, by the way, just awarded by The Economist as Country of the Year?
Absolutely.
Do you think Emmanuel Macron might be tempted to box above his weight category?
That has been France's intention, to be able to box above your weight category for a long time. So I don't see why he wouldn't do that anyway. He's shown signs of that already. When Trump says, I'm pulling out from the Paris climate deal, and then immediately Macron not just makes the announcement with his German and Italian counterpart, but his own announcement with make the planet great again, etc. You can see that there's a kind of vacuum, and that France is trying to find ways to raise its profile and occupy that vacuum. But there's no, 1 year ago, people were saying Angela Merkel is the leader of the free world. She was not the leader of the free world. I don't think she wanted to be the leader of the free world or the guardian of the international order. And I don't think that Macron wants it, because he knows that even if he was trying effectively to do it, France is not able. Even Europe together would be hard right now. Is not really organized, is not really prepared, is not really equipped, is not really foreign policy minded enough to be that guardian. But what I'm sure people, head of states like Emmanuel Macron and a few others have in mind is at least do some damage control in trying to preserve that kind of rules-based multilateral order that we are talking about.
Emmanuel Rapnouil of the European Council on Foreign Relations, many thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.